And so I just want to introduce myself and kick it off over to the team. I'm Brendan Holland from the Industry Analysis Division. How are you guys doing? We've got a handful of people in the room, and also we're streaming live today, and it will be archived for future reference. So all the questions we have as we get later on into the program, we either will repeat the questions or we'll pass around a mic so that we can have them for the record, and so people online can see and get the benefit of them as well. So welcome you guys for coming today and for online as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Jake and the team to explain the revised form, which we think will be a lot quicker, faster, easier, and more intuitive in the new LMS program. Jake?
Thank you. So the Commission's filing window for broadcast ownership reports, that's Form 323 for commercial and 323E for non-commercial, opens on December 1. Today's plan is to teach you how to prepare and submit these filings, and to that end, the bulk of today's webinar will be Jessica and Chris creating and submitting sample reports and teaching you how to go through the form. By way of introduction, though, here's a few things that have changed since last time. Forms 323 and 323E have both moved from CDBS to LMS. Previously, NCE filers submitted pursuant to rolling filing deadlines based on station license renewal date, and now they're on the same unified every 2-year filing window that commercial stations are. This year's window, again, opens on December 1st, closes on March 2nd, 2018. Both forms have undergone some changes since the last biennial filings. Most of those changes you will see as Chris and Jessica work through the form. As a general rule, 323E now looks much more like 323. The forms have become much more similar to each other. For those familiar with the CDBS version of Form 323, the biggest changes involve, first, allowing parent filers to list multiple subsidiary licensees along with their associated stations on a single report. That is in lieu of having to file separate reports in connection with each subsidiary licensee. And eliminating the need for filers to submit spreadsheets listing the other broadcast interests held by reported parties. Taken together, these changes both reduce the number of required filings and the complexity of individual filings. They should make the filing task a lot easier for most people. Again, Jessica and Chris will highlight these and other changes as they go through the reports. Speaking of which, Jessica will start with working through a Form 323E filing for a licensee entity, so a non-commercial licensee report. Then Chris will work through a parent 323 report, so a parent commercial filing. However, because both forms are so similar, much of what Chris and Jessica say will apply to both forms. So even if you're only interested in commercial or non-commercial, it makes sense to pay attention to both because you're getting good information each time. Our sample filings will use dummy data, so nothing we do today's seminar will actually be submitted or become part of our filing data. We know you'll have questions, and we think those will be useful, and we're happy to entertain them. Because we are working through the forms item by item, we intend to pause at relevant points to entertain questions about the stuff we've covered recently. We will also have a question and answer period following the formal presentation. And everybody who is watching remotely, you can submit questions by email to form323@fcc.gov. While Jessica and Chris do the heavy lifting, I'm going to monitor that email address, and we'll work to get questions submitted via email addressed. If we don't get to an email question during the webinar, though, we will respond via return email as soon as we can. So with that, I'll hand it off to Jessica.
Okay. Well, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. As Jake mentioned, I will be demonstrating a non-commercial licensee report, but again, do pay attention, even if you have no intention of filing one, because what I'll be covering will also apply to commercial reports. So first I want to introduce LMS. As Jake mentioned, there will be no more filing of 323 and 323E in CDBS. So please don't attempt to do so. Please do not attempt to submit paper filings to us. I still need to say that. You will be completing your forms and filing in LMS. For those who are not familiar with LMS, you need to log in using an FRN and its associated password. The FRN that you use to log into LMS doesn't necessarily need to be the FRN for the respondent for which you are filing. So in other words, you can log in with one FRN and then create multiple different filings using different respondent FRNs. I understand that's unique to 323 and 323E. So here we have our FRN and password. We're going to log in. And again, today we're working in what we call our testing environment using dummy information. So there might be a few things that might look a tad bit different, but nothing certainly drastic. So as you can see, this is what we call our LMS dashboard. We have some saved reports already in our system. We have some filed reports. In order to initiate a Form 323 or 323E, you want to go to File and Application and go to Ownership Reports. But actually, I do want to make one note here. From our dashboard, you see we have a copy button. That is where you can copy a saved biennial report to create a new biennial report. So that is a functionality you'll see on the dashboard once you initiate a new report. So we're going to... Let me just show real quick again. So we would go to File and Application, go down to Ownership Reports, and we have what we call 4 flows. We have 2 versions, of course, a commercial 323s, a biennial or non-biennial, and the same with our non-commercial. So, of course, select the one that is relevant to you. And I actually have a few that's already started. So if we were to, let me just go back here. Oh, just a second. That's because I didn't navigate as I should. Here we go. So that brings me up to a couple of important points. One is we hope that LMS is more intuitive if you're able to shop online. I mean, a lot of the functionality is the same, typing in address, information in address fields, etc. It's important to know that you can navigate a little more freely in LMS than you could in CDBS. For instance, you have these application section links here, so you can click from page to page. You don't have to complete it in order. You can, for the most part, there might be a few exceptions. You can tackle one section and go back and do another at another time. To move from page to page, you would click Save and Continue. As I demonstrated before, you want to be careful not to navigate through browser buttons because you might lose data. So we can pretend for a moment that I went and I created a non-commercial biennial report, and this would be the first page I'd see. It would be general information. Of course, what we see here, too, I do want to note this. It should be self-explanatory, but I have some green check marks that indicates that on those pages we have no validation errors, and the red X's, of course, mean that there are errors. So again, this is something that's a little different here, is that this will tell you, it will give you a snapshot of what pages you have some errors on. Another thing that's great with the way we designed our form in LMS is that we're only showing you the questions that are pertinent to you. So for instance, we've selected a licensee report. And because we selected licensee, we've been prompted to upload our ownership chart. Had I selected entity, that question wouldn't appear. So there are, of course, 2 ways. You can upload an ownership chart, one of which is to click the link. I've done one for you, and I think you would just browse and find it on your local computer and hit upload. And I've done that already, as you can see. Or if you have perhaps a single parent entity or there are no parents, you can explain that in the box here. That's similar, of course, to CDBS. Moving on, you would select your filing purpose. We've already, as we initiated the form, we said we were going to create a biennial. Of course, we have 2 options here, biennial or validation and resubmission. For 2017, validate and resubmit, it will not be an option, but it will be available again in 2019. We're working with a new form, right? So there's been revisions from the 2015. So you will need to start from scratch, but as we've discussed and we'll showcase today, we think it won't be too much of a burden, and I think it'll be well worth the effort in the long run for you. Moving on, our as-of date for both commercial and non-commercial filers, it is October 1, 2017, and we've filled that in for you. It is the only option on our drop-down. There's nothing you really need to do there. Application description. As I can show here on our dashboard, we have this description column here, so that's where, of course, you can provide a nickname for your report. You would fill that in on your general information page. Again, that similar function that you may have seen in CDBS. Before moving on, are there any questions about this page? Yes. Actually, if we just get the... if you can ask the question, I'll repeat it. That's fine.
What is it, when you go in originally, is this under licensee, license, authorization, or facility?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand that.
When you go in CDBS at your opening screen,
Mm-hmm.
you find your file and application is under three different things.
I see.
Authorizations or facilities, which one?
Well, see, what I did is so the question is, where do you find the forms when you start? And when I logged in, this is actually the page that shows up, and so I suppose it's under applications, which to me is the default that appears. So from applications, I hit file an application on the drop down, and there it goes. Okay. Are there any other questions before we? And again, we'll have a Q&A option at the end, so this isn't your last opportunity to ask questions. Okay, hearing none, we'll hit save and continue. This is the respondent information page. As the name suggests, this is where we put in the FRN and the other identifying information for our respondent. There are a few changes here too as well. And since we would put in our FRN and password, and we'd hit validate. And you'll see here that what we've have is the name, the entity name has actually been pulled in from CORS. So there's no typing that is necessary on your part aside from putting in the FRN and password. You'll see this is another instance where once you type in the FRN and password and you save and you move on, this field will be locked. Again, that's because, just like with the licensee and entity question on the first page, what you provide here will dictate what shows up perhaps later on in the form. So that is by design. And so again, just be something to be mindful of. So here we've put in our FRN and password. Our name is pre-filled from CORS. I've went ahead and beforehand and typed in our address and contact information. Another thing to note here, when you see an asterisk, that means that's a required field. So because we're filling out a Form 323E, we have a question that is actually specific to non-commercials. Is the respondent's governing board directly or indirectly under the control of another entity? If we clicked yes, we're reminded that that entity would need to file an own separate 323E. So I'll hit save and continue. And as you can see, we have 2 green check marks. We've successfully validated each page. Were there any questions about the respondent information? Okay. Hearing none, we move on to the contact representative page. I think this is self-explanatory. You would type in contact information. Again, the fields work well, as you would expect in a regular website. If you perhaps forget to fill in a field, you will get an error message before you attempt to move on. For those of you who are familiar with CDBS and have fought with account maintenance and you're frustrated when you see something that was in there just get perpetuated throughout the form and you're unable to change it, I mean, you don't have to worry about that going on. You can easily go in and change and update your information as needed. This is our licensee and stations page. This is where you enlist the stations that are for which you are filing, that are covered by your report. Here we've done some things that will minimize a lot of the data entry you'll need to do. And you'll see, or you should see, let me see here. I'm sorry. You know what? I'm going to go back real quick because I think we have I want to make sure I demo this for everybody, right? Okay, let me just. I apologize for that. I just want to make sure I type in a correct password so I can demonstrate this new feature here. So just give me a moment. Okay, so just in the meantime, are there questions so far about what has anybody seen? No. Okay. My apologies. Okay. So, as it should work now. So I did not have the correct FRN in the respondent information page. So what you've seen for licensee reports, we will have pre-filled a list of stations that are associated with the FRN, and they will appear. Jake, I don't know, did you want to add something? Oh.
Basically, what this functionality does, it looks in our database for station FRN associations, and it pulls in stations that are associated with the licensee FRN. In general, you will see more stations than you actually want to file for because there have been past FRN associations. So you'll get a list of stations, and you will pick stations off of the list. But just make sure that you pick the ones you want to file for, not the ones that you do not.
Right. So what we see here are stations that are currently associated with our respondent's FRN, and they've pulled through here. If we want to add them to the report, what we would do, we would click all the ones that were associated with our licensee on October 1, and we would click Add, and they will show up here in selected stations. So you have to do that extra step. And again, as Jake has mentioned, you might end up with some stations that are pulled here that might be translators, for instance, or stations that were bought after October 1. You also have the instance where perhaps there's a station that was with the licensee on October 1 but has been since sold, and you want to make sure. So that wouldn't pre-fill because it's no longer currently today associated with that respondent FRN. So to add that on a licensee report, you would select facility ID. You would type in that station's FAC ID and hit Find Stations. You'll get a pop-up prompting you to enter the FRN associated with that station on October 1. Here would be our respondent's FRN, and that is pre-filled for us. So we'll just simply hit Save. And little TV magic, it has showed up here. And if we're satisfied with that list, we'll hit Save and Continue. We hope that people will find that this design is certainly save a lot of time. I know in the past it's required a lot of data entry. We encourage you to take a look at the instructions here. That's something else that we've also done in LMS is have put in instructions. Of course, you should also review the instructions in the paper version of the forms. But again, we have embedded some instructions and additional guidance within LMS. Are there any questions about this functionality? Okay, and for those of you who are streaming, again, we are monitoring the email address, and we will respond to you one way or another if you do have questions about this. Okay, so satisfied that we have our appropriate stations in the selected station box, we'll hit Save and Continue. This is where we would enter our contracts. I think this is, again, these are contracts or instruments that are required to be filed with the Commission. There are certain licensees that aren't required to list them. If that applies to you, it hit Not Applicable. Otherwise, this works as a subform typically does here. I have one started. I do want to demonstrate something here, though, and that is the dates. So we are using a month, it's a full year convention here. You can just simply type in the date, right? Or you can use the calendar function. One thing I do want to note is if you want to move to different years, I suggest just clicking this year button, and it will bring you to different decades. And that's a lot easier to navigate than just hitting this little arrow. And if we needed to add others, we can we can also use save and add another, and it would create another record for us to enter our information. Are there any questions about this page? Okay. Now we come to our ownership interest section. Again, we encourage anybody who has questions about attribution to review the instructions here, as well as what's in the paper version of the form. As you know, the respondent must be the first record. We've done that for you. But as you can see, we have an error. We do need to go in and provide a little additional information. So I'm going to open that. Okay, so let me scroll up to show you what we've done here. So we have our respondent FRN, and that is pre-filled our name from course. Positional interest, you will not be able to check any because we're doing this as the respondent's record. We have our address filled in from the respondent information page. Voting interest, you cannot provide any information. It's disabled because, again, this is a respondent record. So now these are the two questions that require our attention here. One is this a tribal nation or a tribal entity? This question will come up if this is an entity interest holder. If that does apply, you would just simply check the box. If it doesn't, you will leave it unchecked. We have here the other attributable broadcast interests. So if this interest holder has an attributable interest in other broadcast stations that aren't covered by the report, you would click yes, and that's all you need to do. No spreadsheets. No spreadsheets that might be very frustrating and bear on our system and yours. So, Jake, do you want
to be absolutely clear? This appears on the subform for each interest holder you report. So this is not about the respondent. This is about each interest holder. Every officer that you report, does this person have other broadcast interests? Every shareholder you report, does this shareholder have other broadcast interests? So it's a question that's asked for each reported interest holder on the report. But checking this box is in lieu of uploading a spreadsheet reporting what those interests are. This is easier.
Yes. So I will demonstrate just a few subforms here. Don't worry, we won't be filling out a complete report. So I have one started already for Jane Thompson. So we'll just click Edit for a moment here. So I've already entered her. She has a standard course FRN. We entered that and hit Validate, so her name is populated. That was pulled in from course. We've selected her positional interest, and we've filled in this requested information here. We went and completed her business address. Interest percentages. A couple of things I want to note here. One is we are now requiring numbers to the 10th decimal place. I know in the past, at least for the commercial reports, we were requiring whole numbers. So we've gone back to requesting numbers to the 10th place. So even if it's a whole number, you need to add 0.0. Another thing, I'll make a note with respect to, again, we're filling out a non-commercial report. So we're just assuming in our universe here that we have 5 individuals with equal voting rights. So we've went and just put 20% here. Equity, we've put 0. Chances are that's going to be 0 for non-commercial reports. For our total assets, again, this we're leaving blank because this interest holder is not attributable due to the EDP standard. That's not triggered here. So if that EDP, if you're not attributable due to the EDP standard, please just leave it blank. No need to put in zeros or any other convention. Just leave it blank. What might be new for our our non-commercial filers is now we're requesting the gender, ethnicity, and race information for individuals. United States here for citizenship is defaulted, but certainly there's a drop-down list with other options. Select your gender, ethnicity, race. You have a couple options here. You are free to pick more than one if that applies. And again, as Jake noted, that this question does appear for every interest holder. And again, no need to do spreadsheets. Okay, and I do want to also demonstrate quickly the creation of a special use FRN. I know that might be of interest to our non-commercial filers. Just a quick note about that. We're creating a special use FRN. We've already checked that this individual does not already have a special use FRN, doesn't already have a restricted use FRN or a standard CORS FRN. The question has come up, how do I know if someone has a special use FRN? If you look on previous reports on which that individual's reported, if you see a FRN beginning with 999, that is a special use FRN. So here we've checked this person has no FRNs and wishes to use a special use FRN, so we'll hit create special use FRN. Now what we've been prompted here, which is a little different than what you may have seen in CDBS, is we are going to provide a name. And that name is pulled in here, and we'll just go through quickly. So far, are there any questions about entering ownership interest holders on this page? Okay. Just forgive me for a moment as I just fill out this record. And we're just going to assume here that this is okay. I do want to also demonstrate another functionality here that I think will be useful for many of you. As you see here, we have some interest holders with the same address. We don't want to go in and enter the same address over and over again. So if you find yourself doing that, I encourage you to use our duplicate function here. We'll hit duplicate. And this will just create a new record. As you can see, the address has been copied over, as well as the interest percentages, but we'll need to go in and just provide the other information. So if you find yourself, again, entering a lot of interest holders with similar, same address, and maybe certainly same mirroring percentages, voting interests, certainly take advantage of that functionality. So here we entered, just want to note here, 213 will be the prefix, I guess, for a restricted use FRN. So that is how you can quickly eyeball and identify a restricted use FRN. So and of course you would register for a restricted use FRN in CORS. So I'll just go through quickly. So that is, we don't need to type any of this, and we'll just go on. So we'll just hit save and continue it. Are there any other questions about this page? No. Okay. So we'll just move on to our next page. Again, we can move on either through using the links here or the buttons on the bottom. So we're coming to the end, at least of this demonstration. We have here two questions, one of which is you're certifying that anybody or any entity not listed on this report is not direct attributable interest in the respondent. If you find that you need to click no, you have a box here for an explanation. And here, this is where you would also If you're seeking an attribution exemption for an officer or a member of the governing board, you will enter their information here, name, title, and explanation. Any questions on this page? Yes?
Many universities have many officers, or people with traditional officer titles, such as vice president. The way the form is set up, you've got to enter each of those individuals separately and provide an exhibit that explains why they should be exempt from reporting, as I understand it, and looking at the form here.
If you're seeking attribution exemptions.
Well, right, and so part of the question is, in the university context, who qualifies as an officer? Is it somebody that has a given title of vice president of academic affairs or vice president for administration or whatever it may be? Or is it somebody maybe appointed by the board of trustees, the chancellor or the president of the university? Mm-hmm. I mean, I've got clients who may have 20 or 30 people with officer titles because it's a large university that has many diverse operations.
Right.
So all those people that you listed would be officers for purposes of this report. However, they may qualify for an attribution exemption, and that would be, the standard is duties wholly unrelated to the broadcast operation of the stations.
Right. So what you're saying, though, is you've got to list 20, 30, however many people it is individually, and provide a separate explanation for each of those people.
The explanation may well be the same for most of those people.
In which case you could repeat it. So what I would say is that hasn't changed.
That's not a change.
However you've reached that determination that these people are attributable / reportable on your 323E, it's the same as it has been. So that issue isn't changing, and whoever you reported on last year's report.
So it's up to the licensee to decide who's an actual officer. Because my point goes back to, some people are given titles. A traditional officer in a corporate context is set forth in the corporate bylaws, and then is either. But universities, others don't operate that way.
What I would say is it's a little bit beyond this, on the scope of what we're covering today. But that policy and that determination hasn't changed by anything that we're doing today. So however you reached that determination previously, or whatever rights and obligations attached to those titles, if they're real officers or directors, just as they would in a corporation, if they have rights and obligations to that entity, then they're reportable and attributable. If they don't, and it's an honorific, then you presumably wouldn't have to include them. But that's kind of beyond the scope of what we're doing today, and that hasn't changed. So if you have specific questions about that, we can try and tackle those offline.
Right, but they still need to, each individual, looking at the form here, each person is a separate listing. Well, I'm just looking at the form, attribution exemptions, name, title.
Sure.
So each of those people
that's true in the past.
And it's right. It's just.
If you're looking to 323 that you filed 2 years ago, and you've got 22 people listed, you'll have 22 people listed again, unless there's some reason that they've changed.
Well, I'm talking about 320. The old 323E
Correct.
Didn't have a place to. You could do an exhibit or something. Well, you couldn't actually attach exhibits. The form had problems, let's say. That's fine. I guess we'll figure it out as we go along.
Yeah, and again, nothing we're doing here is changing that determination.
I understand the policy is not changing.
Correct. So, and again, whoever you reported previously on your 323E will be the same people that you're reporting now, with whatever ebbs and flows in the board and officers that have occurred in the interim. So I'd say, looking back, we're not adding to the scope of who has to be reported on the form. Who is attributable or who is reportable is the same as it's been in your previous instances. So hopefully it's a little bit easier. And as Jake said, if there are folks who you believe should be exempt from attribution or reporting on the form, there's a place to do that, and there was previously a place to do that. But this is a little bit easier. Maybe you can cut and paste or link them all up to a single exhibit that explains why the 10 people are not really attributable in the entity.
Any other questions about this page? No. Okay. So as you can see here, we have all green checks. And again, if there were errors on the page, I think as you saw, you'd see a big, red X, and the form's been designed as such, in LMS that it should be easy to identify what your error is. If you really are stumped, certainly you can take a screenshot of it and send it to us at form323@fcc.gov, and we'll be able to help you troubleshoot. But again, I think the error messages are fairly straightforward. So here we have called our summary page. We see have all green check marks. We can be ready to file. One thing you might find yourself doing is want to take a look at the draft copy. Maybe you need to send it to your client. So let me just open that quickly. Hopefully it'll go quickly. Here we go. So then, this is something you can share with your client if you need them to take a look at it before you file. So since we're ready to file, we'll do continue to certify. I've already typed this in already, but if you're doing this in the first instance, of course, you'll have to type in the titles and names and other information. Don't think this is different than what you would have seen in CDBS. And then we submit our application. As you can see here, we have a file number. The numbering convention is different in LMS than it was in CDBS. We can also download our reference copy, which will have the file number on it. If you were filing a commercial licensee report and you had viewable stations, at this point here you would actually see a button that says to pay fee, and that would generate a $159. And we're because of what we're demonstrating today, we probably won't be able to show you that, but I think it's very, very straightforward. And that should look very similar to you. So you would see that button here. That would appear after you've submitted your form. And just do view submitted applications, and that will bring us back to our dashboard. As you can see, our submitted report is hanging out here for the moment. It will move to, I don't know, what's the proper term, like filed? It'll go from submitted to filed in a relatively short amount of time. Right. And
it goes to disposed, which means the same thing.
I'm sorry?
I think it goes to disposed or the reports tab.
No,
it goes to the reports tab.
Yes, you can see we have some previously filed reports that have a status of received.
Right.
So they will be sitting in your dashboard, and you'll be able to locate them. I think, are there any questions about filing? Yes?
Two questions.
Oh, if you could just wait for the mic so we can, so our friends online could hear us.
Questions. One, you touched on it briefly. So if it were a commercial and you do pay fee, it would generate the $159 and take you to pay.gov to pay by credit card or check, like CDBS does now.
Yeah, it should basically look just like what you've experienced in CDBS.
Okay. Second question: once this is filed, submitted, whatever, will auto import over into the new online public information file system that everybody's got to be on by March 1st?
It is set up to work that way.
Yes.
Do that.
Okay.
I'm getting a thumbs up from Hossein in the back, so that means yes.
Okay. Thanks.
I actually have a couple questions here, not from me, but from the email. Here's a couple that a few that we could address real quickly. First of all, if you could stay on that screen.
Which, I'm sorry,
the one the dashboard.
The dashboard. Okay, we will.
Do you see that yellow box up there that says your FRN is not associated with stations in the database? That message comes up because we are allowed in LMS. Usually, the way it works is you log in under the FRN of the licensee that you're filing the report for. We have set this up so you don't have to log under that FRN. You can log in under a parent FRN. Now, there will be no station associations with that parent FRN in LMS, and that's what that yellow box is telling you. You'll see that yellow box. Don't worry about it. It basically, that is proper because you're using a parent entity's FRN. That's a warning, really not an error, and you can ignore that. You can proceed even though that message appears. And it usually will unless you're under a licensee's FRN. Second question we had, for NCE stations, usually the board members have no equity interest in the stations. How do we represent that? And the answer to that is 0.0. Just type it in the box. And the third question that we had was, several people asked, can we copy filings over from CDBS? And the answer, unfortunately, is no. The systems just don't talk to each other well, but once we've got through this first round, you'll be able to copy everything forward for the next year.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I think we're going to just take a brief 10-minute break so we can set up for our second round. Sorry, there one more question?
Once you've got this form.
Oh, right. Sorry. Thank you.
So you got the form going. Somebody acquires a station. They file their report following an assignment and transfer. Will it be possible to copy that form into the next biennial ownership report filing so you don't have to go back and re-enter all of the individual information? Or is it only a like form to like form? So biennial report you can copy, but a non-biennial report you can't copy into a biennial?
That's a good question. The answer is that we're working for a functionality that will allow you to copy a non-biennial to make a biennial. Now, some of the information will be missing because they ask different questions, but to at least start, but that will be that will not be workable this year, but workable for the next year.
Okay.
Or the next filing round, I say, 2 years from now.
Okay, I think at this point we'll take a 10-minute break. We will begin again at about 1:55. Thank you. Okay, we're going to be resuming. Welcome back. Of course, there's just a few notes. I understand for those who are streaming that they might be experiencing some technical difficulties. We apologize for that. I understand that if you try to view us via Firefox, you'll have better luck there. I understand it may not be working in Google Chrome. Secondly, if you need to review this at a later time, either due to technical difficulties or you just want to go back and refresh yourself. Please take a look at our website. I usually recommend people find our website by just Googling FCC Form 323. We have a website that we update with information. We will put a link to the this session when it becomes available. Give us a couple of days. It takes a few days for that to generate. And then if you continue having technical difficulties, please let us know as well. You can email us again at form323@fcc.gov. And with that, I will pass the mic over to Christopher Clark, who will be demonstrating a commercial parent report.
Hi. So as Jessica said, I'm going to be demonstrating how to file a commercial parent report on Form 323. A couple of things to begin with. Jessica went over this already, but for those of you who may have missed it, to launch a new ownership report, you click this File an Application button right here. That'll expand a drop-down list, and just scroll down till you see Ownership Reports and put your cursor there. And that'll expand another sub drop-down menu, and you'll see the 4 options. And then you just click the relevant one. But I've actually already started a report that we're going to go over, so I'll just go to that one. And another thing, Jessica mentioned this earlier too, but you may have noticed that we're working out of the same, we've created multiple reports for different respondents while logged into LMS under the same FRN. So similarly, you'll have the option of creating multiple reports for different respondents while logged into LMS under a single FRN. So we're going to begin with the general information page of Form 323, which looks much like the corresponding page on Form 323E. The mechanics of LMS Form 323 are largely the same as the mechanics of LMS Form 323E, which Jessica discussed in her presentation. In the interest of time, I'm going to focus mostly on the features that are unique to Form 323. If you have questions, raise your hand if you're attending in person. Those watching remotely can submit questions via email to us at form323@fcc.gov. All right, so here's the relationship to stations question. As with Form 323E, your response to the relationship to stations question will determine whether and how certain questions are displayed on Form 323. For instance, on the general information page, if you select licensee, the application filing fee question will appear at the bottom of the page, and it's not shown here because I already selected parent entity. And you will also see, if you selected licensee here, you would see a pop-up requesting information about the licensee's vertical ownership structure. As you can see here, my response to the relationship to stations question is locked on this report, and I cannot change it. This is because I previously moved off this page after selecting a response to this item. Any questions about the general information page? All right, so we're going to move to the respondent information page, and you're seeing these errors because I previously landed on this page and left without completing all of the information. So as with Form 323E, here you must enter and validate the respondent's FRN and password. So I'm going to go ahead and enter those right here. Okay. And now I'm going to enter the password and then just click Validate FRN. And as with Form 323E, the name associated with that FRN will pre-fill in the name field upon successful validation. You won't be able to change the name or the FRN after you successfully validate it, after you successfully validate an FRN and password combination. And that was the same with Form 323E. I've already filled out the respondent's address, phone, and email. And of course, you would select the nature of respondent. In this case, a for-profit corporation. If you select other, you'll see a drop-down where you would provide a description of the nature of the respondent. All right, here's the contact representative page, which looks pretty much the same as it does on Form 323E. Just enter the name, address, phone number, and email address of the respondent's contact representative, and then you can move on to the next page. As Jessica mentioned, you can either, once you've entered data, you can either click Save and Continue or just navigate using this Application Sections menu, and the data that you entered will be saved into the form. All right, so this is the licensees and stations page. This is where you add stations and licensees that are covered by your report. Here are the instructions on how to add stations to a report. To add stations to a parent entity report, you would scroll down here and select FRN in this drop-down list, and then enter the FRN of the subsidiary licensee, and then click the Find Stations button. So I'm going to go ahead and enter the licensee of the subsidiary licensee in this case. And then just click Find Stations. All right. And actually, I probably should have scrolled down, but this list was actually empty at first, and then when I searched for stations using the FRN function, that's when it populated. So I'll actually go back and redo this so you can see that. All right, so as you can see, the available stations list is empty, so let me go ahead and re-enter the FRN of the subsidiary licensee. All right, so as you can see, it's retrieving the data. All right, and it pulled the stations that are associated with that FRN. The list of pulled stations may include more stations than you need for your report. For example, it might include an FM translator or a station that was acquired after October 1. Be sure to review the list carefully and select only the stations you need to add to the report using these checkboxes right here. And if you after you review the list of pulled stations, if you find that that all of the stations are the stations that you need to add to the report, then you can just click the checkbox next to all to select all the stations, and then just click add. And once you do that, the stations would move to the selected stations list. As you can see right here, the Potomac Licenses LLC stations. And this list contains the stations that are covered by your report, because I previously added stations that are stations for another subsidiary licensee. Those stations are here as well. Those are the Hartman Radio Licenses LLC stations. And you would just repeat the steps that I just walked through for each subsidiary licensee you would like to add to the report. In certain cases, you may need to add...
I'm sorry, we do have a question.
Sorry, is there a question?
Yeah. What if you have, is that only for direct subs, but how about if you have multiple levels?
So if you have multiple levels, basically this is for any licensee. Any subsidiary licensee. So if you're filing for a parent, if it has a subsidiary licensee somewhere down the chain, you would, and it has an attributable interest in that subsidiary licensee, you would include that in this section of the report. So it
does not have to be it does not have to be a directly held licensee sub. It's any licensee subsidiary. This allows parent entities, wherever they are in the chain, to file a consolidated report, and even to file if they have subsidiary licensees that they hold through slightly different chunks of an ownership change, as often happens in a complex structure.
Yeah, and I think what's different than the last form is I think you previously had to identify who was directly below you in the chain. You no longer have to do that. All you have to do is tell us at bottom what licensee is this for, so it eliminates that step. So that's what's gone.
Just to be clear, for those who are streaming online, that the question was just, which licensees do you need to list on that section, right? And as again, we're just looking for the stations that are covered by this report.
All right, so in addition to adding stations using the FRN of a subsidiary licensee, you also have the option of adding stations by facility ID, and you would use this functionality in cases where you weren't able to pull the station using the subsidiary licensee's FRN. For example, a case where a station was transferred or assigned after October 1. And you can click this link right here, and it'll basically give you some instructions on how to do this. But to sum it up, you just select facility ID in this drop-down list, and then you enter the facility ID number associated with the station that you would like to add to the report. And click the Find Stations button. And then this Edit FRN pop-up will appear, and this is basically asking you to enter the FRN that was associated with the facility as of October 1.
The licensee, right? The
Yeah.
licensee FRN.
Yeah, the licensee's FRN. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. and then just click Save. And the form will add the station directly to the selected stations list. If we scroll down, you'll see the facility number that I just entered, along with the FRN that I entered. So that's how you do that. And once you've added all of the licensees and stations that you need to add, you can go ahead and proceed. So this is the contracts page. Because this is a parent entity report, not applicable has been pre-selected and locked. So you can't uncheck it, and you can't add contracts. If this were a licensee report, then you would need to basically, if it's a licensee that holds authorizations for one or more full power TV, AM, or FM stations, you would need to list all of the section 73.3613 documents on this page. But if it's a licensee that only holds authorizations for a Class A TV or low power TV stations, you would select not applicable. But again, because this is a parent report, not applicable has already been selected for you, and the response has been locked, so you can't change it, so you can't uncheck it.
And as a reminder, this was a simplifying step that we took in our last report and order. It used to be that you could upload these contracts to licensee reports and parent reports, and that had sort of two effects. Number one, you would often enter the same documents on multiple reports, and oftentimes no one single report had the whole list of documents. The change we made basically was any of the documents, all of the documents should be listed on the licensee report and no place else. Just get the list of documents together, put them on one report, and we're done. So that's why we don't allow the contracts to be uploaded to a parent report, because under our simplification, they shouldn't be there anymore. They should be on the licensee's report.
So now we're going to move to the ownership interest page. As on Form 323E, the first ownership interest entry on Form 323 is for the respondent, as you can see right here, Capital Broadcasting Corp. And the form creates this entry for the respondent using information that you have entered elsewhere in the form to partially complete the entry. Jessica discussed the pre-filling. I'm just going to click edit because as you saw, we had an error. We had a question that we needed to answer, but Jessica already discussed basically, how it pulls in the information and how it basically disables these positional interest categories for you because it's the respondent. This entry is for the respondent, and those don't apply. So the only two things that you need to worry about on this record for the respondent would be the tribal nation or a tribal entity item. So if the interest holder, if the respondent in this case is a tribal nation or tribal entity, you would select this checkbox. And then you would also need to answer this other attributable broadcast interest question. As on Form 323E, you can add an ownership interest entry to Form 323 by clicking the Add Ownership Interest button. You also have the duplicate functionality that Jessica demonstrated earlier. For this report, I went ahead and added a number of ownership interest entry records. Just in the interest of time, I'm not going to demonstrate how to add those, just because Jessica already did that. If you'd like to edit an entry, you have this edit button right here that you can use to do that. You can also delete an individual entry by clicking the delete button next to that entry. If you want to delete all entries other than the entry for the respondent, you can click delete all right here. So now, one more thing. In this case, we have more than 10 records. If you needed to see the other records, just click next. All right, so now we're going to move on to the next section of the form. Ownership interests continued. Other than the family relationships question, the questions on this page also appear on Form 323E, and Jessica already covered them in her presentation. If you need to add a family relationship, select yes to expand the question. You see this error message right here again because I had previously landed on this page and left it without answering this question. So the form is always going to basically give you an error if you don't enter required information, if you don't answer a required question. So I'm going to select yes. To add a family relationship, after you select yes, you click the Add Relationship button. And you'll get this Add Relationship pop-up. In the pop-up, select the relationship type. You have these three options. And then enter the FRN of each individual interest holder. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. In this case, our interest holders both have restricted use FRNs. All right, and you don't need to enter any names, and you can't do that. When you successfully validate the FRNs, then the system will pull in that data from core. So I'm going to go ahead and click Validate FRN. And as you can see, it pulled in the names and locked both fields. So in order to actually finish adding this relationship to the form, you click Save. But before doing that, I just want to note if you attempt to enter and validate an FRN that is not listed in the ownership interest section and associate it with an individual, the system will return an error. All right, so I click Save, and now the relationship is on the page. If you enter the wrong FRN and don't realize it until after you've already added the relationship, you can use this Remove button to remove it, and then complete the process all over again to enter it correctly. So now we're going to move on to the next section. Newspaper interest. Enter attributable newspaper interest as of October 1. As with previous versions of the form, you have the option of entering newspaper interest by creating subforms or uploading newspaper interest using a spreadsheet template. So I'm going to go ahead and show you where that is. So you would obviously select yes. Here's the link. These are some instructions, but here's the link if you want to enter newspaper interest directly into the form via subforms. And this is what that page looks like right here. It's similar to the add ownership interest subforms. And then in addition to that first option, you also have this second option to do the spreadsheet upload. Just click here. And you'll get some further instructions on that, including a link to the template where you can download the template that you need to use to upload the information. So we're going to move on to the next part of the form. Actually, let me select No here. And all right, this is the ownership report summary page, nearly identical to the corresponding page on the new form 323E. For licensee reports, fee amounts will show up on this page, and Jessica also mentioned that previously. And at this point, you may want to print the draft copy, which you can do by clicking this link right here to download it, and review it, or send it to your client for review prior to filing. So we're going to go ahead and proceed to the certification page. This is the same certification as the previous version of the form. So I'm going to go ahead and enter the required information. Are there any questions? All right, looks like there are no questions, so we're going to go ahead. After we've completed these required fields, click Submit. All right, and this is the confirmation page where you can download a reference copy. You'll get the file number. And it basically just provides a brief summary of some of the information you on your report. All right. Once you've submitted a report, it will show up on the submitted applications tab. Once the report is processed, the status will change from submitted to receive. Generally, that should take about 10 minutes or so. But once it's processed, it'll appear in the reports tab with the status of received. If you file a report, submit a report, and then you realize that you need to correct something on that report that you previously submitted in LMS, you would go to this reports tab in order to file an amendment and find the report that you need to amend and click on the file number for that report. And then here, you would just click on File an Application, and that would expand the drop-down list where you have this option to launch an amendment. This menu also includes a copy option, which you can use if you would like to copy a report that you previously submitted to create a new report. For copying, you also have the option of copying a report that's saved but not yet submitted. And Jessica previously mentioned this, but the button for copying saved reports is right here on the applications dashboard. You would just click the copy button next to the relevant report. And basically that's how you file a parent report on Form 323. And we've also shown you how to file an amendment and how to copy a submitted report, and also how to copy a report that's saved but not yet submitted. Are there any questions?
If you use the copy function, and you then need to make a few changes to, say, officers or directors that have changed over time, it will allow you to delete those who are no longer there and just add in the new people. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it will allow you to delete records in the ownership interest section. So if you've entered someone who no longer, who shouldn't be on the report, then you asked about amendments, right?
No, just as you're saying, over time, officers may change, directors may change, and just being able to delete somebody who's been removed as a director or officer and add the new name, as long as it's obviously not resulting in a change that requires prior commission consent.
When you copy a report, you can make those changes. Right. Now, within this round, the changes wouldn't happen because of over time. You're sort of talking about going forward. But for purposes of this round, if you have a parent entity that has almost all the same officers, directors as another parent entity, you can do one report, copy it, and then make those changes as well. So that's what it's designed to do.
Right. In other words, nothing's baked in or locked in. You'll have the flexibility to make edits as you need. Okay. Do we have any questions from our online audience that we? No? Okay. For those who have submitted questions to us online, Jake has been typing furiously during our demonstration, has been responding to you. If we don't get back to you today, we will get back to you soon. I guess, Brendan, would you like to make a few announcements?
I was just going to thank you guys for doing this. I neglected to mention at the top of the program that Chris, Jessica, and Jake are 3 members of our industry analysis division in the Media Bureau and have been working long and hard on the implementation of 323 and 323E and LMS. And we think this is a big step forward. It'll make it a lot easier for filers. It's pretty, as you saw today, pretty easy to navigate, and hopefully will reduce the amount of time and effort on your side of things. As Jessica also said, there is a web page already that will be a great resource going forward into the filing window. We'll have frequently asked questions there, as well as a copy of the program today for future reference, and any other releases or public notices that we put out going forward if there's any need to communicate with folks. But if you have questions, that's the first place to look for answers, as well as to reach out to us through the email address, and we'll get back to folks as quickly as we can. So, are there any other questions from online, or are we good?
We're all good.
Okay. Thank you guys very much for coming. We appreciate it, and the window will be open on Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.